Welcome to 5-Minute Lessons for Nonprofits. I'm Ben Takis, and today we're going to talk about opening a bank account for a new nonprofit. This is one of the most important initial steps in the process of forming a new nonprofit organization, and I found that there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding about what's required to open a bank account, so I'm hoping with this video I can help clarify some of these issues. First, let's talk a bit about choosing a bank. For most new nonprofit organizations, the features and services, for example, remote deposit, fees, bank balance minimums, etc., they're going to be very similar regardless of the bank. So in my opinion, customer service should be your number one priority. You want to look for customer service representatives who are familiar with nonprofit organizations and are willing to help you navigate the process and solve problems as they arise. When to open a bank account? In my opinion, this should be done as soon as possible after you've completed these 3 steps. First, you've filed articles of incorporation with the state because the organization needs to exist as an entity before it can get its own bank account. Second, you've held the first board of directors meeting at which you've adopted bylaws, appointed officers, and approved a set of standard first board meeting resolutions. Lastly, you will need to have gotten an employer identification number, sometimes called a tax ID number or EIN. After you've completed those first few steps, it is important to get the bank account open sooner rather than later. You want the organization to start running its operations through its own separate bank account. This is important for maintaining clear records and avoiding possible compliance failures. What documents are going to be required when you open a bank account? I like to think of these in 3 categories. First, you've got the organizational documents that you must provide in all cases. Second, you've got the organizational documents that may be required depending on the particular bank and their processes. And lastly, you'll find that there's additional documents and bank forms that the bank is going to give you to fill out as part of this process. Starting with the must-have documents. The first one of these is the articles of incorporation, as I mentioned before. Next, you need to show the employer identification number or EIN. Be aware that many banks require the official IRS confirmation letter showing your organization's EIN and may not accept just a screenshot from the IRS website. For this reason, what I recommend is to have an officer of the organization submit the application for an EIN online at the IRS website and be ready to download the IRS confirmation letter in PDF format at the end of this process. But do make sure that you're using the actual IRS website and not some third-party website. The easiest way to do this is to go to irs.gov and put EIN in the search bar, and that should get you to the right place. Next, some organizational documents that may be required depending on the bank, starting with the bylaws. And these should be signed and certified by an officer of the organization, typically the secretary. Some banks also want to see a copy of the resolutions approved by the board of directors at that first board meeting, which will show who the officers are and show the authority of certain officers to open the bank account. Next, if you're trying to open the bank account in a state that's different than the state where the organization incorporated, banks will very often want to see a copy of your foreign corporation registration. This authorizes the organization to do business in that state. And you may also find that the bank wants to see a copy of the IRS letter approving your organization's tax-exempt status, or perhaps alternatively, the application that you sent to the IRS for tax-exempt status, or perhaps the charitable solicitation registration in the applicable state. In my opinion, a bank should not be asking for these documents because these processes take quite a bit of time, and a nonprofit needs its bank account to get started with a lot of this. So just be prepared that you may need to have this conversation with your bank and explain to them where you are in the process and show them that you have properly filed as a nonprofit corporation in your state. Lastly, you will find some additional documents and bank forms that are going to be required as part of this process. Most notably, the beneficial owner forms, which disclose board members and officers of the organization. This document is required by federal banking regulations. However, it's a bit confusing because it's not well drafted to apply to nonprofit organizations which don't have owners. But just know that what they're looking for are the people who exercise control over the organizations, mainly the board members and officers. The bank will also need some additional information about the officers who are going to have signature authority over the bank account. This is all very standard, but do exercise caution when storing and sending this sensitive information. And you may also find that the bank has some questions about what the organization does and where it is physically located and operated. Banks have been under more pressure in recent years to vet their clients, so I think this explains a lot of the increased scrutiny and deeper questions that all business entities are getting, including nonprofit organizations. That should do it for today. For more information, visit the website at SE4nonprofits.com. Thanks, and see you next time.